He didn't bark, he didn't cry, he just sat there tied to a tree, watching the road, like he was waiting for someone to come. Back 4 months, old, maybe 5, skinny. Soaked from the storm the night before. His ribs showed beneath his patchy fur. One ear flopped the rope around his neck. Was frayed, pulled tight, and low forcing. His chin down, and still he didn't look. Away from the road, not when my truck. Pulled up, not when I stepped out, not. Even when I called to him, he just watched like every pair of headlights. Might finally beat him, I walk slow. Hands out, voice soft, hey, there buddy you. Alone, no movement, just those eyes hollow. Tired searching, I'd seen that look. Before in war zones and shelters in. Mirrors, I crouched down, mud soaking. Through my jeans, it's okay, I'm not here. To hurt you still nothing, but he didn't. Run didn't growl, he just waited like. That was the only thing he knew how to. Do I saw the empty metal bowl beside him. Rusted dry, a torn towel frozen stiff in. The dirt whoever left him here had made. It looked almost intentional, like someone might return, but they wouldn't. I knew that, and deep down, so did he. I reached from my pocket, pulled out a piece of jerky I kept for strays, tore in half, and set it down between us. That's when he blinked just once, then again a tremble ran through his legs, but he didn't move forward. I laid the other half of the jerky next to his paw. Take your time, I whispered. I've got nowhere else to be. The wind picked up. Pine needles danced around us. His head dipped slightly, nose twitching. Then, slowly, cautiously, he licked the meat, and then he looked at me. That was the moment. I saw it, not fear, not anger, hope, faint. Worn out, but still there. I took a breath and reached for the knot around his neck. It's okay now, I said. You don't have to wait anymore. And that's how I met. Axel tied to a tree in the middle of nowhere, still believing someone might come back, but from that moment on I would be the one who never left. He let me untie the rope, didn't flinch, didn't back away, just stood there silent and still while my fingers worked through the frozen knots the collar had rubbed raw spots into his neck. I winced when I saw it. He didn't react, like pain had become background noise when I finally slipped the rope free. He didn't run, he just sat down right in the dirt and looked up at me. I swear it was like he didn't know what to do with freedom. I carried him to the truck. He was light, 2 light bones beneath for no struggle, no sound. He laid his head against my chest the whole way, breathing slow, shallow. I opened the passenger door, laid him on the old blanket I kept there, and turned the heat all the way up. He didn't move, didn't even lift his head. But when I shut the door and walked around to the driver's side, I caught something in the rear view mirror, his eyes watching me. I pulled out onto the road, one hand on the wheel, the other gently resting on his back. You're all right now, I said. I got you. He blinked once, then closed his eyes, not out of trust, out of exhaustion. I drove straight to Elise's clinic. She met me at the door with gloves already on this and peeking into the cab. You found him tied out near forest hollow, no houses nearby, no tracks but mine. She reached in and gently touched his ear. He's freezing, dehydrated too. I nodded. He's tough, just empty. We brought him and laid him on the table. Elise and her tech worked fast. Fluids, vitals, warm compresses. Axel didn't resist any of it, just let them do what they needed. Quiet still. He's not shut down, Elise said finally. He's just done. I stood at the edge of the table, watching him. Someone tied him there to be forgotten. Elise met my eyes. Not anymore. That night, I sat in the clinic's recovery room, a thin mattress on the floor beside his crate. I didn't sleep, just watched him every rise and fall of his chest. Felt like a promise he hadn't made yet. Around 3 a.m. he stirred open, his eyes looked right at me. Then slowly he reached his paw through the bars, touched my hand, and held it. The next morning, Elise brought in coffee and a quiet look that said everything. He made it through the night, she said softly, kneeling beside the crate. That's something. Axel was awake. Barely. He hadn't moved much, but his eyes followed us now, not out of fear, out of observation. He was trying to read the Room trying to understand why no one had. Left him, yet Elise opened the crate. Slowly and held out a small bowl of chicken and rice he didn't touch it at. First, just looked at her hand, then at me. Like he needed permission. Go on, buddy. I said, that's yours. He sniffed then. Licked once, twice, and within minutes he was eating cautiously like every bite. Might be taken away again when he finished. Elise sat back and exhaled. He's got a good appetite, that's a win. I nodded, but my chest ached watching him. There was something about the way he moved, careful, small, like he was still. Tied to that tree in his mind, he doesn't. No, he's free, I murmured. Elise glanced at me. Give it time. Later that afternoon, I brought him home. He walked into my house like it was a trap, took 2 steps through the front door and froze, looked around, didn't wag, didn't sniff, just stood there like he was waiting for the least to snap him back. I let him have space, didn't touch him unless he came. Closed, left the back door open so he could see the sky. I put a water bowl beside the couch and his blanket in the corner. He curled up on the floor, not the bed, not the blanket, just the floor, and stared at the door. Hours passed then. Sometime after sunset, I sat cross-legged on the rug and said quietly, I know what it's like to wait for someone who's never coming back. He didn't move, but his ears twitched, and then he crawled inch by inch toward me, laid his head on my boot, and exhaled. That was the first time I cried. Not loud, not messy, just one silent tear down my cheek, because I realized he wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of hope for the next few days. Axel didn't leave my side. He followed me from room to room quietly like a shadow. If I stopped too long, he'd sit down behind me, never making a sound, just waiting, watching, like he was always bracing for the moment I'd disappear at night. He wouldn't sleep unless I was on the floor with him. I'd roll out a blanket next to his bed, and he'd inch closer until his head rested against my shoulder. The second I moved, he'd wake up, eyes wide, breathing shallow. It wasn't fear of the dark, it was fear of being left in it. On the 4th night, a storm rolled in hard, thunder, cracked rain pounded the windows. Axel bolted upright, tail tucked, panting. He darted behind the couch and wouldn't come out. I sat with him for an hour, gently stroking his back, whispering that he was safe, but he kept shaking. That's when I realized he'd heard storms before, but back then he was alone, tied up, waiting, and no one came. I pulled my blanket onto the floor right there in the living room and lay beside him until he finally drifted off again. Breath pressed to my chest. The next morning, something changed. We went outside, just to the backyard. The grass was still what I expected him to freeze at the threshold, like he had every other day, but this time he took a step, then another, then he ran, not fast, not far, just a clumsy circle around the yard, tongue out, ears flopping like they didn't know what joy was supposed to look like. I laughed, really laughed. For the first time in months. You're getting it, Axel, I said. You're learning what life's supposed to feel like later. He came back inside and curled up on the couch, not the floor. I sat beside him, and he put his head on my lap. No hesitation. I brushed a few twigs from his fur and whispered, you don't have to wait by the door anymore. He looked up at me, eyes soft, like maybe for the first time he believed me. Axel started to come alive after that, not all at once, more like pieces of him waking up bit by bit. First, it was the way his ears perked up when I opened the fridge, then the slow tail wags when I came in from another room. He even barked once, just once, when a delivery guy knocked at the door. It startled us both, but he was learning that the world could be loud and not dangerous, that people could come and go without breaking promises, that a door opening didn't always mean someone was leaving for good. We fell into a rhythm. I'd get up at 6 o'clock. He'd follow me to the kitchen, plop down near the coffee machine like it was his job to supervise. We'd go for short walks. Axel still stayed close, almost too close, like he was tethered to my leg by something stronger than fear. One morning, Elise Called to check in how's our miracle dog. I smiled, he's getting there, think he's. Ready for a visit, I hesitated visit. Where there's a center downtown vets. With PTSD, I volunteer there once a month. You should bring him just a sit, nothing. Formal, I looked at Axel, asleep with his head on my boot again. I don't know if I'm ready, I said. Honestly, there was a pause, maybe you both, or she said more. Then you think I thought about it all day, and that night I found myself talking to him. I lost my partner in the field. I told him 3 tours together. Then gone, I promised I wouldn't open that part of me again. But then you showed up tied to a tree, still waiting. Axel didn't move, but I swear he was listening. So we went to center, was quiet, tucked behind a row of old brick buildings, no signs, just a space of room, with chairs, men and women sitting in circles, some with canes, some with wounds. You couldn't see, I wasn't sure what to expect, but when we walked in, Axel didn't freeze. He walked straight to the man, sitting alone in the back, older, silent, and gently laid his head on the man's knee. The man looked down, eyes wide, then closed them and whispered, he knows. That's when I knew Axel didn't just survive. He understood. Words spread faster than I expected. Within a few weeks, the center invited us back. Then again, soon Axel and I had a standing visit every Tuesday. We didn't do anything official, no tricks, no tasks. We just showed up, sat in the room, and stayed, and somehow that was enough. The veterans noticed. They started to greet him by name. Some would reach down and scratch behind his ears without saying a word. Others would just nod. Axel didn't need attention. He needed presence, and he gave it without asking anything. In return, one afternoon, a younger vet, mid-30s, scars on his arms, anger in his eyes, walked in and stopped cold when he saw Axel. He stared for a long time, then finally he said, my unit had a dog like that. I waited. She didn't make it. He added softer, now I never really got over it. Axel stood up, walked over, sat beside him. The man didn't touch him, didn't even look at him, but he didn't move away either. They just sat there for the rest of the session, still quiet. Together that night, the man found me in the parking lot. Where'd you get him? He asked. I told him the truth. Found him tied to a tree, waiting. He nodded, looked away, then said, that's what it feels like, this thing, PTSD, like you're tied to something invisible, and every time you try to walk away, it yanks you back. I didn't say anything, but Axel took a step forward and pressed his head against the man's thigh. He froze and dropped to one knee and wrapped his arms around Axel's neck and sobbed. That's when I stopped calling Axel my rescue dog. He was never just rescued. He was a rescuer. He didn't bark commands or patrol fences. He didn't need it. All he had to do was stay, and in a world full of running, staying was everything. The weeks turned into months. Axel grew stronger, steadier. He learned to walk confidently into every room, but never rushed. He waited, like always, for someone to need him, and someone always did. His calm presence had a way of disarming even the hardest hearts. One day, the center asked if we'd be part of a new pilot program, bringing therapy dogs into one-on-one sessions with veterans who had stopped responding to traditional treatment. The first appointment was with a man named Roy, early 50s, former infantry. Hadn't spoken during a session in 6 months. His file read, severe social withdrawal, refuses eye contact, history of night terrors. I brought Axel in and sat quietly in the corner. Roy didn't even look up. Axel stood in the doorway for a moment, then slowly made his way across the room. He didn't push, didn't whine, just eased closer and sat down 3 feet away, facing him. For 15 full minutes there was nothing. Then Roy shifted and Axel did too, just slightly matching him, adjusting. 5 more minutes. Then Roy muttered without lifting his head, he's patient. I held my breath. Axel tilted his head. Roy looked up, met his eyes, and for the first time since starting therapy, he smiled. He reminds me of the one we lost. She waited for me too. I swallowed hard. Roy reached out, hand trembling, and touched Axel's chest. Axel Didn't move, didn't blink. He just stayed. After the session, the therapist pulled me aside. Do you know how rare that is? She asked. Roy hasn't let anyone touch him in over a year, but that dog, he let him in, and I realized something Axel didn't just understand. Pain, he recognized it, he honored it, he didn't try to fix it, he just sat with it until it wasn't so heavy anymore, and in that quiet companionship people found something they didn't know they were still capable of the beginning of peace. We kept going week after week, Axel and I walked through those same doors. The faces changed, sometimes new veterans, new stories, new scars, but Axel stayed, the same quiet, grounded, present one. Afternoon, we met a young woman named Natalie, early 20s, military discharge. After an IED left her with nerve damage and chronic pain, she used a cane and rarely spoke during group sessions, but that day she arrived early, sitting alone on the floor against the wall. Eyes distant. Axel noticed her immediately. He trotted over, confident but gentle, and without hesitation laid down beside her, not in front, not beside her, cane next to her hip, shoulder touching hers, head low, body soft. She didn't acknowledge him at first, just stared ahead. Then I saw her hand move, not to pet, just to rest on him, like she needed to feel something warm that wouldn't disappear. After the session, she stayed behind and asked if she could walk him to the parking lot. I handed her the leash, and they walked side by side, slowly in sync. When we reached my truck, she paused. I used to have a shepherd, she said quietly, before deployment. I nodded, waiting. She was like Axel, always calm, always watching. She looked down at him, then back at me. I haven't touched another dog since she died until now. Axel leaned against her leg, tail gently brushing the ground. She knelt, kissed the top of his head, and whispered, "Thank you for waiting for me." That night, I sat on the porch with Axel. He lay at my feet, head on my boot. Like always, I watched the stars come out one by one and thought about all the people he'd already reached, not through training, not through commands, just by being, by reminding people that they were still worthy of love, still capable of connection, and that maybe, just maybe, the world hadn't forgotten them after all. One morning I woke to find Axel sitting by the door. He wasn't pacing or whining, just sitting still as a statue, eyes fixed on the handle, like he already knew something was about to change. I stood beside him, placed my hand gently on his back. "You ready to go?" I asked. His tail thumped once, quiet, certain we were scheduled to visit a youth shelter that day, our first time working with kids instead of veterans. I wasn't sure how Axel would react. Trauma comes in all shapes, but children, they carry it different, softer on the surface, deeper underneath. The shelter director greeted us with a warm smile. "They've heard about Axel," she said. "We told them he's a dog who knows what it's like to be left behind." We stepped into the playroom. 10 kids sat in a circle on the carpet. Some looked up, others didn't. One girl, maybe 6 years old, sat cross-legged with her hoodie pulled up, face hidden. Axel didn't hesitate. He walked past the noise, past the volunteers, past every outstretched hand, straight to her. He sat down, tail tucked, and waited a minute. Past then 2. Finally, she peeked out just enough to see him. "Is he sad?" she asked, voice almost a whisper. I knelt beside her. "He was for a long time, but he's learning how to feel safe again." She nodded slowly, then crawled forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. Axel leaned in, closed his eyes then, and rested his chin on her shoulder, like he'd been waiting for that hug his whole life. Later, when we were getting ready to leave, the girl tugged on my sleeve. "Could he come back?" she asked. "Some of the kids here, they need him like I did." I swallowed hard and smiled. "Yeah, he'll come back, I promise." Back in the truck, I looked over at Axel. His head rested on the armrest, eyes tired but calm. "You did good today," I said, "really good." And for the first time since I'd known him, Axel licked my hand without being asked, just once, but I knew what it meant. He understood. He'd been waiting his whole life to be someone's answer, and now he was. The anniversary came quietly 1 year to the day since I found him tied to that tree waiting for someone who was never coming back. I thought about ignoring it, pretending it was just another Tuesday, but some moments asked to be honored, so we went back same road. Same stretch of woods. A tree was still there, scarred at the base, rope marks still faintly etched into the bark. The bowl and towel were long gone, but the memory sat heavy in the air. Axel stepped out of the truck and stood still. He looked around slowly, his ears twitched, his nose lifted. I watched him search, not with fear, but with recognition, like he knew exactly what this place was. He walked to the tree on his own, stopped, sat, no trembling, no confusion, just stillness. I walked over and crouched beside him. You remember, don't you? I said softly. He didn't move, just stared at the road like he used to, but there was no desperation now, no waiting, just peace. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a simple metal tag on it, etched in quiet letters. I tied it gently to a low branch, let it hang, catching the breeze, a marker of memory, a promise kept. You're not the dog who was left behind anymore. I whispered, you're the one who stayed and kept going. Axel pressed his shoulder against my knee, and I knew it wasn't just a story anymore. It was ours. That night back home, we curled up on the porch as the sky faded from gold to blue. Axel lay at my feet. Like always, his breathing was steady, calm, and I realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud before. He saved me, not by doing anything grand, not by barking or chasing or protecting, but by staying, by showing up, by proving that even when love is broken, it can still find its way back through patience, through presence, through pause. At once waited and now walked beside you every single step of the way. Axel's story isn't about being abandoned. It's about what happens after the rope is gone, after the door stays open, after someone finally shows up and says, I'm not going anywhere. He didn't choose to be tied to that tree. He didn't choose to be forgotten, but he chose to keep loving, and that's what makes him extraordinary. He taught me that healing doesn't come in a rush. It comes in inches, in quiet moments, in the space between trust and time. He didn't rescue people by doing tricks. He rescued them by staying when no one else would, by listening without speaking, by showing us that waiting isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. If Axel's story touched your heart, please share it, because there are more dogs like him right now, tied up in the cold, waiting for someone to believe they're worth saving. Be that someone. Join our brave Paws family. Like, comment, share. Together we can change the world, one waiting heart at a time.